The November afternoon had brought an unexpected rush to the Corner Brew, the small cafe where Hannah Cooper spent most of her Saturday afternoons. She sat at her usual table by the window, her laptop open, a half-finished cappuccino cooling beside her, working on the freelance graphic design project that was due Monday morning. At 29, Hannah had grown comfortable with her routines. She lived simply in a modest apartment 2 blocks away, worked from home most days, and found contentment in the quiet rhythms of her life. The cafe had become her refuge, her second office, the place where she felt most creative. Today, though, the cafe was packed. Every table seemed occupied, and people were standing near the counter, waiting hopefully for a seat to open up. Hannah glanced around, feeling slightly guilty about monopolizing a 4-person table all by herself. That's when she noticed him. A man in his mid-30s stood near the entrance, a little girl of maybe 4 or 5 holding his hand. He had dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it too many times, and he wore a charcoal blazer over a white shirt that suggested he'd come from somewhere more formal. The little girl had curly brown hair and wore a purple sweater, and she was looking around the crowded cafe with wide eyes. The man scanned the room, clearly searching for a place to sit. His daughter tugged on his hand and pointed to something in the display case, saying something Hannah couldn't hear. On impulse, Hannah raised her hand slightly and caught his attention. When he looked over, she gestured to the empty chairs at her table. He hesitated, clearly surprised by the offer, then nodded gratefully. He said something to his daughter, and they made their way over. "Thank you so much," he said as he approached. His voice was warm, with a hint of relief. Every other place we tried was just as packed. "I'm Ryan, and this is my daughter, Isabel." "Hannah," she replied with a friendly smile. "And it's no problem. I was feeling a bit guilty taking up a whole table by myself anyway." Isabel climbed into the chair, across from Hannah, and immediately pulled out a small box of colored pencils and a drawing pad from the bag Ryan was carrying. She set to work with the intense concentration only young children can muster, her tongue poking out slightly as she drew. Ryan excused himself to order at the counter, returning a few minutes later with a hot chocolate topped with whipped cream for Isabel and a black coffee for himself. He settled into the chair next to his daughter, and an easy quiet fell over their corner of the table. Hannah returned to her work, occasionally glancing up at the peaceful scene across from her. Ryan was reading something on his phone, one hand absently smoothing Isabel's curls whenever she leaned against his arm. It was a tender gesture, unconscious and natural, and it made Hannah smile. After about 20 minutes, Isabel looked up from her drawing and turned the pad around to show Hannah. "Look what I made," she said proudly. It was a picture of what appeared to be a butterfly, rendered in enthusiastic swirls of purple, blue, and pink. "That's beautiful," Hannah said genuinely. "I love the colors you chose." Isabel beamed. "Purple is my favorite. What's yours?" "I think I like teal," Hannah said thoughtfully. "It's like blue and green had a baby." Isabel giggled at this description, and Ryan looked up from his phone with an amused smile. "That's a good way to describe it," he said. "I might have to use that." "Feel free," Hannah replied. "No copyright on color descriptions." They fell back into comfortable silence, but now there was a sense of connection, a shared space that felt warmer than before. Hannah found herself less focused on her work and more aware of the little family unit across from her. "Are you an artist?" Isabel asked suddenly, craning her neck to try to see Hannah's laptop screen. "Sort of," Hannah said, angling the screen slightly so Isabel could see. "I'm a graphic designer. I make pictures and designs for businesses and websites." "That's so cool," Isabel breathed, her eyes wide. "What Isabel means," Ryan interjected with a grin, "is that sounds infinitely more interesting than what her dad does." "And what's that?" Hannah asked. Ryan shrugged self-deprecatingly. "Finance stuff. Very boring. Lots of numbers and meetings." "Daddy has meetings all the time," Isabel confirmed solemnly. "Even on Saturdays sometimes." "Not today, though," Ryan said firmly, ruffling her hair. "Today is just for us." There was something in the way he said it, a deliberate emphasis, that made Hannah wonder about their story. Was he divorced? A widower? She didn't want to pry, so she simply smiled and returned to her work. But working had become difficult. She found herself drawn into their orbit, listening to Isabel's chatter about her preschool friends, watching Ryan patiently help his daughter when she couldn't get a color quite right, observing the easy affection between them. After about an hour, Isabel announced she needed to use the bathroom. Ryan stood to take her, but Isabel insisted she was a big girl and could go by herself. Ryan watched her walk to the restroom at the back of the cafe, keeping his eyes on the door until she'd safely gone inside. "She's wonderful," Hannah said softly. Ryan's face lit up with unmistakable pride. "She's my whole world. Has been since the day she was born." "Just the two of you?" Hannah asked gently. Ryan nodded. Her mother passed away when Isabel was 18 months old. Aneurysm. No warning, no time to prepare. One day she was here, and then he trailed off, looking out the window. "So yes, just the two of us." "I'm so sorry," Hannah said, meaning it deeply. "Thank you." Ryan took a sip of his now cold coffee. "It's been hard, but we've found our rhythm. She probably won't remember her mother much, which breaks my heart. But I try to tell her stories, show her pictures, keep that connection alive." Isabel emerged from the bathroom, and the conversation shifted back to lighter topics. But something had changed. Hannah felt the weight of Ryan's loss, the responsibility he carried, the love that drove him to be both mother and father to his daughter. As the afternoon stretched into early evening, the cafe began to empty out. Hannah had long since abandoned any pretense of working. Instead, she'd helped Isabel with her drawings, told them both about her work, and learned that Ryan's boring finance stuff actually involved running an investment firm his father had started. "We should probably get going," Ryan said eventually, glancing at his watch. "It's almost dinner time and someone needs a bath before bed." "I don't need a bath," Isabel protested automatically, but without much conviction. As they gathered their things, Ryan turned to Hannah. "Thank you for sharing your table. And your afternoon. This was really nice. Much better than sitting at home." "It was nice for me, too," Hannah said, surprised by how much she meant it. Ryan hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I know this might be forward, but would you like to exchange numbers? Maybe we could do this again sometime. Isabel clearly thinks you're pretty great, and her judgment is usually sound." Hannah felt a flutter in her chest. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, and Isabel gave Hannah an enthusiastic hug goodbye before taking her father's hand. Hannah watched them leave, Ryan holding the door open for his daughter, the two of them stepping out into the early evening together. Hannah sat back down at her now empty table, her laptop forgotten, and realized she was smiling. She hadn't been looking for anything that afternoon. She'd just offered to share a table. But somehow, in the space of a few hours, something had shifted in her world. The next day, a text arrived. "Isabel wants to know if you'd like to join us at the Children's Museum next." Saturday. No pressure. But she's already told 3 people about my new friend Hannah. Ryan. Hannah laughed and typed back, "I'd love to." That Saturday at the museum, Hannah discovered that Ryan was patient and playful, getting down on the floor to explore exhibits with Isabel, making silly faces to get her to laugh. He was also attentive to Hannah, making sure she felt included, asking her opinion, sharing private smiles over Isabel's head when the little girl said something particularly adorable. Over the following weeks, the 3 of them fell into a pattern. Museum visits turned into walks in the park, which turned into movie afternoons and pizza dinners. Hannah found herself thinking about Ryan at odd moments during the day, remembering something funny he'd said or the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. And she fell completely in love with Isabel, who had started calling her Miss Hannah and would run to hug her whenever they met. One evening, about 2 months after that first meeting in the cafe, Ryan invited Hannah to his home for dinner. He'd cook, he promised, though he warned her his culinary skills were limited. When Hannah arrived at the address Ryan had given her, she stood on the sidewalk for a moment, staring. The house was in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, a beautiful modern home with clean lines and elegant landscaping. This wasn't the home of someone who did boring finance stuff. This was the home of someone very successful. Ryan answered the door with Isabel bouncing beside him. "You found it okay?" "Yes, Ryan, you didn't tell me you lived in a place like this." He looked almost embarrassed. "Does it matter?" Hannah thought about it. Did it matter? Ryan was still the same person who let Isabel draw on napkins in restaurants, who knew the names of all her stuffed animals, who'd shared grief and laughter with her over coffee. "No," she said honestly. "It doesn't matter." Dinner was simple pasta and salad, and it was perfect. Afterward, while Isabel played in her room, Ryan and Hannah sat on the back patio, watching the sunset over the city. "I need to be honest with you about something," Ryan said quietly. Hannah's heart sank. Here it comes, she thought, the revelation that would change everything. "I'm not just someone who works in finance. I run Whitmore Capital. It's a multi-million-dollar firm. I've been afraid to tell you because—" He paused, struggling for words. "Because people change when they know. They start seeing the money instead of seeing me. And these past 2 months with you have been the most normal, the most real I've felt in years." Hannah reached for his hand. "Ryan, I'm not going to lie and say the money doesn't surprise me. It does, but it doesn't change how I see you. You're still the dad who carries colored pencils everywhere, the guy who makes terrible puns, the man who loves his daughter more than anything in the world. That's who you are to me." Ryan's eyes were bright with emotion. "That means more than you know." "Can I be honest too?" Hannah asked. "Please." "I'm falling in love with you. With both of you. And that terrifies me because I've been on my own for so long. And I've built this safe, small life. And you're asking me to step into something bigger and scarier and more wonderful than I ever imagined." Ryan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I'm terrified too. I haven't let anyone into Isabel's life like this since her mother died. I've been so careful, so protective. But Hannah, you've brought light back into our home." Isabel laughs more. I laugh more. "We're happier because you're in our lives." "Daddy, is Miss Hannah going to be my new mommy?" Isabel's voice came from the doorway. They both turned to see the little girl standing there in her pajamas, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Isabel, sweetheart," Ryan started, but Hannah held up a gentle hand. "Come here, sweetie," Hannah said, and Isabel climbed into her lap. "I care about you and your daddy very much, and I'd love to spend more time with both of you. But becoming a mommy is a big thing, and we have to take our time, okay? Just like how we became friends slowly, remember? First we shared a table, then we went to the museum. Then we had more adventures together. But you will stay?" Isabel asked, her eyes worried. "You won't go away?" Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise." That night, after Isabel had gone to bed and Ryan walked Hannah to her car, he pulled her close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For how you handled that." "For understanding." "She's been through loss before," Hannah said. "Of course she's worried about people leaving. We'll just have to show her day by day that we're here to stay." "We," Ryan repeated, smiling. I like that word. They married the following spring in a small ceremony in Ryan's backyard, with Isabel as the flower girl. She took her role very seriously, walking down the makeshift aisle with perfect precision, scattering petals with great concentration. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Isabel called out, "I don't object. I want Miss Hannah to be my mommy." The guests had laughed warmly, and Hannah had cried happy tears. In the years that followed, Hannah never forgot how it had all started, with a simple act of kindness on a crowded Saturday afternoon. She'd offered to share her table with a stranger, never knowing that the man in the charcoal blazer was a millionaire, never knowing that the curly-haired girl would call her mommy, never knowing that one generous gesture would change the entire trajectory of her life. Ryan would sometimes joke that it was the best investment he'd ever made, showing up at that cafe, and Hannah would remind him that the best things in life can't be bought or calculated. They happen in moments of connection, in acts of simple human kindness, in the willingness to make space for others in our lives and hearts. Isabel, growing older and wiser, would eventually ask her mother about that day. "Did you know Daddy was rich when you let us sit at your table?" "I had no idea," Hannah would answer honestly. "I just saw a dad and his daughter who needed a place to sit. That's all. But you're glad you let us sit down, right?" "Sweetest girl," Hannah would say, pulling her daughter close. "Letting you and your father sit at my table was the best decision I ever made. Not because of money or houses or anything like that, but because I got you. I got a family. I got love. And that's worth more than anything in the world." And every year on their anniversary, Ryan would take Hannah and Isabel back to the corner. brew. They'd sit at the same table by the window if it was available, and they'd remember the afternoon, when a crowded cafe and an empty chair had brought them together. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary gestures: a shared table, a kind offer, a moment of openness to the unexpected. Hannah had let them sit down, and in doing so, she'd found her place in the world, not at a table for one, but at a table for three, surrounded by love, laughter, and the family she'd never known she was waiting for.